Hello, everyone. Inequality. It affects all of us across all of our intersectional identities, no matter where we are, no matter our race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, both visible and invisible, and more. Inequalities impact all of us on the deepest levels, including our health, wellness, and overall quality of life. But there is hope. There is a rainbow in the sky, and it is us. It is our collective voice standing against inequality in all forms that encourages me. And this is why I'm so happy to be here today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our GES Mobilize track session entitled The American Pursuit of SDG 10 Reduced Inequalities. My name is London, and I am a 2020 African Descent Fellow of the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. I am a proud member of UNA USA, and I serve as a regional representative of the Great Lakes. Today, I am humbled and thrilled to serve as your moderator, and I'm excited to welcome two outstanding leaders, Carrie Zhang, founder of the Asian Mental Health Project, and Lucy Jones, CEO of Fora, a fashion and lifestyle brand that primarily serves people with disabilities. Together, we will discuss anti-Asian hate and mental health stigma, people living with disabilities, and how we can work together to fulfill SDG 10 by reducing inequalities. But before we get into our conversation today, I would like to welcome Jordy Hannum, Executive Director of the Better World Campaign, and he will introduce a video by Representative Barbara Lee of California. Welcome, Jordy.
Greetings, all. It's wonderful to spot so many familiar faces over Zoom, and I only hope that we can see each other in person next year. Right. For those that don't know me, I'm Jordy Hannum, Executive Director of the Better World Campaign. I've been with the organization over 10 years now, and we have a packed session here. So I just want to introduce the next video from one of our favorite and most influential members of Congress, Representative Barbara Lee. While the Congresswoman would have loved to be here in person, she is knee-deep in pushing a range of our most important legislative priorities as the chairwoman of the House State Foreign Operations Subcommittee, which of course provides funding for the UN. As it stands, Congress has 3 weeks to come up with a final spending bill this year. There's a lot to resolve by then, but if passed, the FY22 final bill would almost certainly mean more robust funding for the UN, for global and reproductive health and climate programs, for addressing some of our outstanding arrears, and for rejoining UNESCO. This is understandably taking up much of the Congresswoman's time. But relevant to this session, you should also know that Congresswoman Lee is leading the fight to establish a U.S. Commission on Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. And as you'll hear her say in the video, part of the inspiration for her congressional resolution came from the UN's work and that of dozens of other countries who have reckoned with historical injustice through forming truth and reconciliation commissions. You should also know that this resolution was introduced in the summer of 2020 in the wake of George Floyd's murder, and BWC and UNA USA were original supporters of the bill, and we've been part of almost weekly conference calls since then to rally more support. There are now 172 co-sponsors, and it's our sincere hope that with your help and the tireless efforts of Congresswoman Lee, we can see it passed into law. So without further ado, here's Barbara Lee.
Hello, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Barbara Lee, and I proudly represent California's beautiful 13th Congressional District. I'm so sorry that I'm unable to join the UNA USA Global Engagement Summit live, but I wanted to send my thoughts and well wishes. Let me begin by first recognizing your phenomenal executive director, Rachel Pittman, and of course, the legendary East Bay chapter. While I wish I could be there for this discussion on combating racial injustice and supporting equality through the Sustainable Development Goals, please know that I am with you in spirit. As chair of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on State and Foreign Operations, I have prioritized investment in achieving our Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. My legislation, HRES 30, expresses support for making and meeting key goals of the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, including achieving gender equality, ending extreme poverty, and improving public health. The resolution also states that the agenda's sustainable development goals form a critical blueprint to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people can live in peace and prosperity by 2030. Our list of supporters in Congress is growing, but we'll need your help to urge your member of Congress to support this legislation and get it across the finish line. I have also sponsored legislation marking the International Day for People of African Descent, and I'm organizing a delegation of members to travel to the United Nations headquarters to learn more about the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. I'm working to establish a U.S. Commission on Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation, which will examine the effects of slavery, institutional racism, and discrimination against people of color, specifically African Americans, and how our history impacts laws and policies today. This will go hand in hand with H.R. 40, a commission to study and develop reparations for proposals for African Americans. Countries around the world, as well as the United States, have reckoned with historical injustice and its aftermath through forming truth and reconciliation commissions. Both of these bills can be a powerful tool to move forward restorative justice in our own country and repair the damage done by the false ideology of white supremacy. The resolution currently has 172 co-sponsors, and our support will continue to grow with your help. In my life's work, I have focused on measures to protect and strengthen civil and human rights for all people, especially people of color and other minority communities, which is why I am passionate about upholding the Sustainable Development Goal number 10 for people across the world. As you consider the ways that you can internalize the issues and then externalize the impact, think about your role in reducing inequality for all people, those of African descent, those with disabilities, those who identify as trans, LGBTQ+, those who believe in different faiths, and so on. Active participation in UNA, USA, and events like these are an important step in the right direction, as is telling your members of Congress how you feel about all of these issues and taking part on Election Day and vote. Thank you again and enjoy the summit.
Wow. Powerful, powerful. I want to thank Jordy Hannum for introducing this powerful video by Representative Barbara Lee. And Representative Lee, thank you for your powerful words and your outstanding work. And so now it's time to get into this important discussion with Carrie and Lucy. And I'm really excited to welcome you both. Hello, ladies.
Hi, hello.
It's good to hear from you. Good for you to be here. I want to welcome also all of our participants. And so I want to start out, Carrie, I'd like to start out the conversation with you.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, so we have to note that this is an unprecedented time with the number of anti-Asian hate incidents ranging from using slurs to intentional homicide.
Mhm.
How have these heinous anti-Asian incidents impacted the mental health and well-being of the Pan-Asian community?
Yeah, thank you so much for that excellent question. Just because, working in mental health, that's something that's always on my mind. And I wanted to bring to attention, I believe someone in the chat also mentioned the term collective trauma. And I believe that's what a lot of people in the Pan-Asian community are facing right now. Now, collective trauma is basically one event or a series of events that happens to a certain group of people. And that trauma can oftentimes induce a lot of the same symptoms that we see in PTSD, or what I also like to call, when you're still going through trauma, you're still experiencing those symptoms of hypervigilance, anxiety, stress, all that. Those are all ways that the Pan-Asian community I've seen have been affected in terms of mental health, because there's this overarching worry and fear that we could be next, or there's there's this hate that's going on, and a lot of that does also have to do with racial trauma. Racial trauma, I would put under, the umbrella of collective trauma. It is, years of systemic and overt racism that, are so ingrained in people's minds that it does inherently affect, one's, perhaps self-perception, perception of self-value, but also day-to-day navigating through life and feeling safe. There's a lot I can go into there, but thank you so much for that question.
Absolutely, absolutely. And with that, can you share about some of the resources available to the Pan-Asian community to address trauma inflicted by anti-Asian crimes and that collective trauma? How can these resources be made more culturally competent?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a really excellent question, just because resources are there, and there are many by wonderful grassroots organizations, local organizations, with everything that happened most recently with the attacks on Michelle Go and Christina Unili. I've really seen our community mobilize in protection of Pan-Asian mental health, Asian American women. So I really saw an uprising of a lot of really great grassroots organizations, whether it's self-defense classes within local Chinatowns or collective groups that come together and check in on each other's mental wellness. That is all very, very important. But I will say it is all under sort of the lens and need of what you were mentioning of culturally competent or culturally humble care. I think as an Asian person, when it comes to when it comes to seeking mental health support, the overarching narrative is predominantly white, particularly in the guise of white women, which is great, just because I see mental health conversations being more and more elevated. However, it sort of fails to address thoroughly the nuances of the Asian American experience. So it is so important to have cultural competency and cultural humility at the center of care for Asian folks, just because so much of the mental health issues that we experience or that I experience are directly related to my cultural, racial, and gender identity. There's those intersections of that. So to have that innate understanding in the care that we receive and we give is so, so crucial.
Yes, I understand. And as an African American woman, I can relate, and I appreciate, your leadership in this work. And I want to ask you, Lucy. So you believe in a world that is accessible to all, and I appreciate that. I believe in that as well. Can you share with us how you are inspired to create such an innovative lifestyle brand that caters primarily to people living with disabilities?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks so much for having me today, Carrie. Amazing words, London as well. I'm really honored to be here. So the inspiration and the motivation behind creating Fora that believes in a world designed to all. My background is fashion design, so predominantly a fashion designer, specializing in clothing design, apparel. And I am actually from Wales, so I moved to America, United States, to study fashion at Parsons School of Design. But when I arrived here, I just felt like there was such a repetitive, cyclical industry. And really, do I want to keep contributing to a system when there are so many other people left unaddressed and really not spoken to? I had no idea where I was going to go with this, but it was actually a conversation with a family member who has cerebral palsy that really became the catalyst to the work that I do today. I realized at that point, I was 19 years old, and I realized my whole life I had never spoken to him directly about his challenges and his needs, and as it pertains to the larger society as well. And after that one conversation, I realized, well, damn, here I am at one of the best schools, and why are we not catering to everybody? And that's really what accessible to all really means, even though we have such a long way to go. But that conversation and his comments about the challenges that he has with clothing because of his limited mobility made me reach out to so many more people, start talking and engaging. And that's when, the journey started and continues today.
That's outstanding. Outstanding. Thank you so much. I've read that according to the United Nations, there are about 15% of the world, people in the world are living with disabilities. And so as a person living with a disability myself, I really appreciate all that you're doing to ensure that we are seen and included. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'm going to take a few questions from the audience. And so this is an important question to me too. In what ways do you feel the disability rights justice movement has influenced the fashion industry? Has the industry embraced the movement by recognizing the importance of inclusivity and intersectionality? And if not, why not?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's a great question. I think yes and no. Unfortunately, despite the fact that fashion is supposed to be known as being this vehicle for change, this, proposition of newness and the great predictor of trend, it has been incredibly slow to embrace disabled people. And this is largely in part due to the fact that we live in a world and a society where everything is predominantly designed, by non-disabled people for non-disabled people. So if disabled people and people with disabilities have a seat at the table, guaranteed things would look incredibly different and the world would operate a little differently. But I do believe that social media platforms have seen a rise in people having a voice and people being able to connect with one another and sharing similar interests and advocating collectively. I know myself, pretty much everyone that I work with today in the company has been a friend through social media because we have collectively been following and talking about the same things. There is an amazing hashtag by an activist called Kia Brown, and it's disabled and cute. And that hashtag spoke to so many, young women. And it was one of the things that I was drawn to as well. Yes, it is also about self-expression. And yes, it is about, taking ownership of your narrative. And so I think social media has actually been a truly beneficial factor to the change.
Wow, that's excellent. Yes, social media can be a very powerful tool. And I follow a lot of content creators with different intersectional identities. And it is very powerful to see, folks really shine and make a difference in connecting with so many people around the world. And so I want to take a minute to see if we have any questions in the audience that people are interested in asking Carrie and Lucy. Let's see. Okay. Yes, we have actually a comment from, and excuse me if I don't pronounce your name correctly, Gauthami. Thank you, Carrie, for being that voice. Keep inspiring, and I agree. Thank you so much. And then I have the Honorable Dr. Tita Banks. Hello, Tita. What can UNA chapters do to advance the issue of equality of people with disabilities? For instance, there was a recent incident of a group of students attacking a special needs student. Do we need to ensure such actions are regarded as hate crimes and prosecuted as such? What do you all think?
I was going to say, I absolutely agree. I think that they are hate crimes and I think they should be dealt with. A family friend of mine went through something very similar as a blind woman, and many people basically attacking her online, and I think it should be recognized as a hate crime, absolutely, and prosecuted as such. I think that will also sorry, I just saw another comment come through, and since that has peaked also, I'm on this train of thought right now, but yes, the term special needs also, it is largely frowned upon to use the term special needs or differently abled. By correcting our very language and the way we use terminology is also, a way in which we can change our mindset and the way society views and embraces disability.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Carrie, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, I definitely definitely just echo what Lucy was saying, and in terms of I sort of wanted to touch on the word, there's of course this prosecution, there's consequence of hate crimes and such, but also even before that, making sure that there is education to understand what is right, what is wrong, what is I think that's something that it resonated with me because there was a lot of debate around the recent attacks on Asian American women on whether or not they should be called hate crimes. And they were sort of in the news oftentimes just said these are random attacks. And I know I'm shaking your head. I'm shaking my head. It's not random. But there's something to think about around the language and lack of nuance there is in terms of understanding these what is perceived to be hate. And I feel like there is of course, again, mentioning there's need for consequence, but also need for increased education on how to live in a more inclusive world.
Yes, yes, I agree. Thank you so much, Carrie. And I have a question now for both of you that I'd like to ask. And Lucy, I'll start with you. And it's the same question for both of you. So we are participating in the Global Engagement Summit to ensure that UNA USA members and all Americans see a way forward in terms of how a strong partnership with the United Nations can help bolster work towards reducing inequality. And so I'd like to ask you both, and I'll start with you, Lucy, from your perspective, what can the UN do to advance the work forward in reducing inequality?
Yeah, I think, this might be a standard answer, but it really is to provide seats at the table at every single level. I think one of the issues, and honestly echoing what Carrie just said, I think that's brilliant about education. A lot of times when people approach disability, it's of the viewpoint and of the lens that you need to fix a problem. There is a problem, an identifiable problem that needs to be resolved, and here I am coming in to fix the problem. And that is the wrong mindset to have, because by going in with that mindset, you're essentially not embracing a culture and a community and a spirit, and you lose this sense of opportunity to learn and to grow. So by providing those opportunities and to really listen and engage top down, that's really where you will see the growth. And I think that's what many people can do to embrace the community, is to listen, but also to create the opportunity wherever possible.
Yes, absolutely. I agree 100%. And Carrie, what about you? How can the UN work to advance the movement of reducing inequalities?
Yeah, that is a large question. Oh my gosh, what can the UN do? And you're asking me. Woo! Well, I think, again, one thing I wanted to sort of talk about in terms of, I'll tap back into my sort of education angle of, further educating folks. And as Lucy was saying, ensuring that there are seats at the table for previously disenfranchised or marginalized communities, because that is so important. There's still large gaps of leadership within the UN, and that, of course, as such an influential organization, permeates outwards. So I think that is extremely important to have those seats at the table, have education, and also be sure that we're working towards policies that promote inclusivity, that are, we were talking about cultural competency, but are inclusive and humble to representing all the cultures that are out there, or as many as possible, and identities and such like that. And continuing to have these conversations just like this. This is so, again, such an honor to be here to have these conversations and further that, but from sort of a more policy written level, like what policies are in place now that are maybe harming and oppressing folks? How can we unpack that and undo that? And then advocating for policies that protect people that we may not, many of us may not have recognized perspective wise. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, it is so important for those most impacted by inequality to be at these tables, to be in these rooms. And so thank you both for answering that question. And then I have a question here from Lauren, which is I think is a really important question. And she says, as someone with mental health issues and a disability, what can I do to help my communities? Do you find the concept of intersectionality to be important in dealing with these issues? And I would like for both of you to answer that if possible. And Lucy, can you get us started?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the best thing, I keep going back to really listening and then engaging versus going in and coming in with a set of assumptions. I know that I really messed up in the beginning. I had all these assumptions about the ways in which people live their lives, and I couldn't be more wrong. And now I work to correct that. And now I work to make sure that people are going in and first listening. And I think, that question is honestly, I just need to read it again when I think it's gone.
Sorry,
I lost track of it.
Yeah, I think it was really how can a person living with living with mental health issues and a disability, what can she do to help her communities?
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful question, and it really just goes back to listening, engaging, and then providing the support. One of the other incidents that I know that really begged for allyship was this frequent airlines damaging people's wheelchairs and mobility devices and things that people really depend on. Mm-hmm. And of course, this eventually went viral, but it lived very much within the disability community, and it lived very much within this bubble. And it was shocking because people were left without their means of transportation and independence. And what that really needed was for everyone to call it out and everyone to speak about it and everyone to use their platforms and everyone to support their disabled peers or people with disabilities. And so, to be honest, it really is just keep your eyes and ears open and support where you can.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lucy. And what about you, Carrie?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. That was such a very good question. I wanted to touch on a couple of things. First, your discussion of intersectionality, and for those, something that's the term I learned, relatively later in my life, of saying, I can be Asian, I can be an Asian woman, I can have PTSD, anxiety, depression, I can, identify as a queer woman, etc. And all those things can be true all at once. And that is something that is very hard, oftentimes, for people to accept, not to the fault of necessarily the individual, but oftentimes media representation is so quick and lacks nuance that it's one thing or the other. It's so black and white. It's so binary. So it's important to recognize that. And as for what you can do to help your community as someone, I think the question was as someone with mental health issues and a disability. I love what Lucy was saying about listening and learning, but also don't stop sharing your stories. These voices are absolutely underrepresented, underheard, constantly undermined. So I think it's so important if you are experiencing anything and you are, you feel that your voice is not being heard, that is incredibly frustrating, but that doesn't mean you have to stop saying these things. It is so important to keep sharing your experience, keep advocating for what you want, finding community that is doing the same thing or is on your side, because I guarantee that there are folks out there, even when it doesn't really seem like it. And yeah, just don't stop sharing and keep moving forward with activism and existing. Again, showing up day to day is an act of resistance. Self-care, also an act of resistance. So I think it's so important to keep living your life and telling your story, because it's absolutely valid and absolutely deserves to be heard.
Absolutely. And I would like to add that joy and rest is also an act of resistance as well. And so thank you, Carrie, for your words. And we have time for one last question, I believe. And this is from Marielle. Traditionally, diversity in the UN only means gender and geographical diversity as it relates to UN staff. However, the UN Secretariat launched an anti-racism strategy last year, how the organization deals with racism in the workforce. So I think Marielle was just making a comment here, which I think is very important. Mm-hmm. And I would like to thank you, Marielle, for your important comment. And I know that we are out of time. I really wish we could talk more. We could talk about this all day. But I just want to take a moment to thank you, Carrie and Lucy, for this powerful discussion today on reducing inequalities. I would like to also thank Jordy Hannum and Representative Barbara Lee of California. And then finally, I would like to thank all of our attendees for your time and your commitment to reducing inequalities. As we end our discussion today and continue our work to reduce inequalities, I would like to leave you with a quote by one of my sheroes. She's an investigative journalist, civil rights icon, educator, and anti-lynching activist, Mother Ida B. Wells. And she says, "The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them." And I believe as global citizens, we have the power to do just that. And I want to thank you very much for tuning in today and participating.